I think, what people think is, oh, a pub will be open late. In reality, most pubs, especially in the countryside, they're probably closing at 10, 11 at the latest.
Hmm.
So you go in and you get your drinks early, and you have plenty of them. And then you go home and you pass out after eating some food on the way home, walking, stumbling, bouncing. You find your way back. Where I think the French after work, what they do is they go find a place where they can sit outside and they make sure it's got a really good view to judge the passerbys. And then they order some small plate food and then sip their wine, thinking about, why they smell their own farts. So
Perfect. I think that's summed it up very succinctly.
All right, boys, here we are.
There we are.
Here we are. Back again. Last time we were here, we had a tornado. We had tornado sirens.
We did.
And then like 4 days later, we had a blizzard that shut down most of Iowa. And then 4 days after that, we had frogs croaking in the backyard.
Yeah, what was it 80-some degrees yesterday? The women played a basketball game at home in an unconditioned arena that was 91 degrees indoors.
Yeah.
You see that? It's crazy.
I wonder why they don't have concerts.
The last of the snow was literally melting in the parking lots as people were standing out there. It was crazy.
Dating before a NCAA tournament game.
I don't trust Iowa in March. It's
How can you? How can you?
But other than that, I'm ready, man. It was a nice day today, and we had to, it's all right. It's supposed to be what it is, I guess.
Yeah. Back to normal 50s.
Hey, we have a guest today, John. You want to introduce him?
I do, sure. So we are joined special guest from overseas. Nathaniel Green is a colleague of ours that we do some work with in London. He's based in London. I've had a chance to spend several business trips with Nat. He's been gracious enough to take me on some amazing pub tours in our off hours in both London and up in Scotland and around Edinburgh. We had a large work event that took a good crowd of us over to London this past week. And we normally try to build in some evening time, dinners, other things like that. Nathaniel was gracious enough to put together kind of a historic pub tour for us. So we got a chance to take the dive bar pod on the road, if you will.
Road, yeah.
And so Nat took us around. We didn't record live there, so we're recording now. And Nathaniel's been gracious enough to stay up late into the wee hours of the evening in the UK time zone. And he's going to help walk us through the pub crawl that we did. Of course, we'll post all of our pics and everything that we always do on our Facebook page to go along with the episode when it drops. But that is the cue. So without any further ado, Nathaniel, welcome to the podcast.
No, thank you for having me. Lovely to see you guys again. It's been a long time since last week, but no, it's definitely had a good time. And you go to some places that you don't go to every day in London, which is nice. But some nice historic stuff, and hopefully you guys took away a little piece of the history and stuff, and the drinking culture a little bit over here. But
we certainly did, and we'll go through the pubs we went through and do the history of each of those in a minute. But I should keep Nathaniel. I think is a good person to talk pub and bar culture because he went to college in the States, so
Yes.
he's well familiar and lived for a period of time in Chicago. So he's no stranger to the dive bar culture. So I guess to cue up, Nat, if you want to give us your impressions of the pub culture in the UK versus the bar scene and maybe the dive bar scene in the US, if you've got any opinions about the two.
Yeah, I think there's major differences. I think when I was in the States for a bit of time, I was in Chicagoland, and then I went a little bit further out to a place called Hinckley, more towards like Rockford way, or sorry, DeKalb way. But the differences with you see in the States are kind of, I think, similar to what you can see here. Big higher population centers, you're going to get a lot more crowds going out, and they're using their bars as their pre-game for their nightclubs and things like that. And then when you go into your small towns, it's your like watering hole. It's the locals who all turn around and stare at you as you walk in, and they go, "Who the hell is this new person?" And I would definitely say pubs are like that here. In that extent, they're more. I would frame them more so in the small town place in the States where you're going to have your locals and they go there most nights, meet their friends. It's where they catch up. Pubs here are a social experience, and I would say very family friendly, which isn't, I don't think, so much a US bar theme. From my experiences, you can bring the kid, bring the dog, make it a family day where you have like 8 pints and then walk home together. But States is, I think the difference is, you've got your jukebox, you've got your music, you go there and there's an atmosphere more. I think in the States and the UK, it's quiet. It's a place for the most you can talk. Obviously, later in the night, people might get a little more noisy, but it's a social gathering. It's the public house. It's the place you go to after work and you catch up with friends.
For sure. So, we've talked a lot about the dive bars, and that's kind of the theme of our dive bar. So, we always ask each guest what they think constitutes a dive bar. Since you've spent time in the States, I'll throw that at you. And then on the back end of that, is there what you would call a quote unquote like a dive pub scene in London? Or how do you distinguish a dive bar versus whatever a downgrade pub?
Yeah, so well, I think my take from being in the States, a dive bar is, yeah, it's one, say if you're in a university town, it's full of townies, and then you go in, the floors are probably sticky, and you're going to go to the bathrooms, and it looks like a bomb has gone off, and
Yeah.
no one's really bothered, and you just make do with what you got, but you're gonna get, you know, definitely some interesting people in there, and it's always a good time. And it's one of those places you go into and you end up talking to everyone because eventually they kind of warm up to you coming in. As you get enough drinks down your neck, you end up socializing, and it becomes interesting for sure. But yeah, and then in terms of, I guess, what's a dive bar equivalent in the UK? I would call it what we call a rough pub. So it's a pub where, yeah, the rougher members of society go into. They have like bottom shelf lager, like Carling and stuff like that, and and Foster's on tap, and they're selling it for like £4 a pint. And you go in again, similar sticky floors, destroyed felt on the pool table, that type of environment. And
Elvira posters or no? Do they have
yeah,
any?
yeah, so yeah, exactly. So that type, yeah, I'd say we have it. They're just a dive bar terminology is definitely a US centric thing,
Uh-huh.
but we have it here. It's just rough pubs.
I got to be honest with you, Nat. I'm a little bit terrified of the British culture because in the United States, on our public television station, they have about six British shows. They're all from the early 1800s, like Miss Scarlet and the Duke, and people are just murdering each other like crazy over there. Like every hour, there's another murder in this small little town, and they're sitting in the corner of some pub trying to figure it out. Is that basically a good take on it, or?
I think probably if you went to East London with Jack the Ripper back in the day when everyone, the water quality was so bad, everyone had to drink gin every day. So they're probably all like just getting it, probably hallucinating by the end of the day, might get a little stabby, you never know.
Right. Yeah, everybody gets a little stabby when they get hold of some bad pump water. So,
Well, one of the bars not on the official tour, but the next day at lunchtime, Nat took us to a bar called the Hung and Quartered, right by
Yeah.
the London Tower, which had a bit of a dark history.
Yeah, exactly. It's back in the day you could see the people with heads on spikes or pikes around the Tower of London as a bit of a warning, don't do what they did. And
Right.
or just some nice people hanging and disemboweled, depends on the flavor of the day.
Right. Just don't descend from the throne.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. You got any other questions before we go through the tour?
No, let's do the tour.
Okay, let's lay into the tour, Nat. So you took us to, well, I guess first, before we do that even, you picked the location, kind of the general area where we were at to start with. So you want to just tell us a little bit about Old Town Central London. And for those who aren't familiar with the geography of London, what is distinguishing about that?
Yeah, so obviously London today it's like most cities, it's expanded like massively over time. So what the areas I picked to take you guys out were is still called the City of London. So it's the original part of London, you know, getting on for 2,000 years ago now, Londinium, which the Romans came over and kind of planted along the estuary and built their walled city, continued obviously through history. And it's most people don't realize, but actually the City of London has a different mayor than London itself, which is Greater London. So that's why all the banks and stuff are based there because they get different tax rates. So anything outside of the City of London is considered Greater London. So you get your Kensingtons, your Chelseas, your Westminsters, your Putneys, Wandsworths, all the boroughs. It's basically over time all these towns and villages got incorporated and caught in the growth of the city and just became part of Greater London. So, yeah, we went to the oldest part, which is always fun.
Isn't it true that to this day, if the king wants to travel into that part of the city, they technically have to notify the mayor of London, and there's kind of a
I,
ceremony around that?
I would imagine, so, yeah, because well, in terms of the residents, Buckingham Palace is in Greater London, so it's a different area, and there's
Yeah.
actually a different police force as well. So I'm sure there's some intricacies between it because they've got so the Metropolitan Police can take care of Greater London. Then you've got the police force for the City of London, and they wear like red and white checkerboard type like
Oh.
shoulder stripes on the
Hmm.
uniform. If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So we were in Old Town London, and we started at the Blackfriars pub. And I'll let you tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Blackfriars Pub. It's in terms of its age, it's obviously not one of the oldest in London. The site itself was where Dominican it was a Dominican friary, so the old school monks. So I guess what you would picture, like I guess in Robin Hood, where you got the guy with the completely bald top, like Friar Tuck type
Yeah.
characters
Hmm.
living. And it's a grade two listed building. It's a protected building. It's nice. It's like a little wedge shape tucked through, right around all these big buildings, and it's the inside's nice. They've dedicated it to the monks with the metal work and the framings of everything in there. So it's definitely got some good character.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
It was
so you
beautiful.
got some great pics of that.
Yeah.
The interior was super cool. You mentioned earlier the cask ales. I know several of us had different cask ales at the
Yeah.
Blackfriar. What's your take on the cask ale? Do you recommend? Is it the thing to get there? Is it overrated? What are your thoughts
So
on cask ale?
cask ale is something I think, I just looking at, I guess, British drinking culture. The younger you are, the more you're going to be necking lagers and stouts and things like that. A lot of young people will be on lagers and more carbonated or, fizzy alcohols like ciders as well. Um, I think it's one of those things you start to appreciate more with age. And, I know a lot of people from the States will go, oh, it's warm, but it's one of those things where if something's really cold and also carbonated, you can't get the true flavor profiles and stuff of the beer. That when it's not that ice cold temperature, you can actually get the hops and the malt flavors coming out of it. And I think you'd be surprised, once you try it, it's actually quite good.
Yeah.
So just to let everybody that's listening know that doesn't know what a cask ale is, can you tell us what is different between a cask ale and a regular barrel ale?
So yeah, cask ales, and I think for me the biggest thing as well is the way they're poured as well is important. If you go into a pub, you're gonna, if you've never been to, I guess, a European style environment for pubs and things like that, especially British Isles or Ireland, you're not gonna be familiar. You're gonna be like, what is this long pipe that they stuff down to the bottom of the glass, and they fill from the bottom up. It's not a top pour, and they overfill the glass, it pours over the side, you're going to have a little bit of a wet glass. And I think, like you guys have already hinted at, it's not ice cold. And
Mhm.
I think it allows you to taste it and enjoy it. And compared to a lager, it's going to be a lot more carbonated, the lager. And I feel like it's one of those things, the older you get, it's kind of like Guinness. You think it's heavy when you're younger, but you realize that it's something you can drink quite a lot of because it's actually more lighter and compared to other beers, and I think ales come under that same viewpoint for me as well, where I think you can get away with more without feeling like you're pregnant by the end of the night with your belly poking out.
Right.
So do they actually come out of a wood cask, or they come out of a keg just like a regular beer, or not?
I for the most they're wood casks, I
Yeah.
believe. Yeah, so I think with modernization, I don't know how many, if they're still doing that, but I think it's also that's where you get the flavors and stuff that you wouldn't from like the metal kegs and stuff like that.
And are they pulled, or is it vacuum pulled, or is it gravity pulled?
It's vacuum pull. It's that old school. That's why you see them pumping. They don't just flick the tap down or the to let it pour. You see it pumping, and that's why they put it down at the bottom first. And yeah, I think it's just old school, and it's definitely something you can appreciate if you see it for the first time.
Yeah. I the United States is going through a bit of a craze that we have to thank for you. And I think probably 3 in every 5 beers that come on the market now are an Indian Pale Ale.
Mm.
Yeah,
A lot of the Indian Pale Ales that I had 20 some years ago were all cask fed.
yeah,
They'd have them sitting on top of their beer coolers up top, and then they would have some sort of aerator at the top where they would fill the pale ale. And yeah,
Yeah.
so
IPA's been around forever, but
yeah,
like the IPA craze in the
yeah.
US feels like it's been like more the last 15, 20 years,
right.
right? There's a craft IPA everywhere, but like IPA's been being poured in the UK since I didn't even know.
Since we've been going, since
Yeah.
the British Isles have been going to India at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah, we got to thank the British Raj for that, I guess. But yes, I guess some hipsters have bastardized our founding ideology of a nicer cask ale and wanted to make it more fruity and
Yeah,
flavor
the history
profiles.
of it is they added extra hops for the journey to India for the colony there, but yeah, there was no hazy fruit
Right.
IPA back in
Mango
No
flavor.
smoothie.
Yeah.
The Americans bastardized the good
Yeah.
concept.
Is there a craft brew scene though? Like I was trying to figure out, Nathaniel, when we were over there, if there were like I know there's been regional beers in the UK. So if you're from this part of, England, you drink a particular brand. But did you like the US have these local kind of garage startups that then became a thing or
Yeah, I think if you were to say, I know that England isn't particularly large geography wise, so I think it's hard for people to understand that you can travel half an hour, 45 minutes, and it's completely different accent and also way of thinking a little bit to an extent. And you can get that where you're going to have regional ales and things like that. Like in the Southwest, where I was at a few years ago and grew up when I was younger, there's an ale there called Doom Bar that's
okay?
really started up, and it's actually becoming popular and it's catching on more nationwide. But that was more of a regional thing it started off with. So yeah, I think there definitely is that, and I think some of the bigger companies like BrewDog and stuff like that, they try and do all these funky stuff some from time to time. But I think there definitely is more so on the smaller scale. You'll find at local pubs they'll have local breweries they go to for their beers and things like that.
From my time in Weybridge, my general observation would be that everything was so compact. Like that was the first time I ever had a washer and dryer in the same unit. My refrigerator was basically a little bit bigger than a college dorm refrigerator. I had to go to the store every night. That Americans have this huge basement or third star garage or whatever to have all of this brewing equipment, all this craziness. And in England, or at least the place I was, there just wasn't a whole lot of space if you wanted to brew beer somewhere.
No, exactly. Yeah, you're exactly right. Most people, everything's walking distance. You don't have like a lot of stuff, and if you do, good luck finding a place to put it. So, I think a lot of these places. That's why. So for like the Southwest, there's a lot more room to play there. It's in the countryside more. They probably got more. They can build a shed in their garden, that type of thing. Where, if you're in the London area, yeah, good luck to you if you want to try and get a setup going.
All right, so the next pub, which was about a block and a half, 2 blocks away, was the Bell.
Mm.
If I got that order correct.
Yeah, Old Bell Tavern. So that had been a tavern for 300 years, and their claim to fame is they're on the same street as Sweeney Todd.
Oh yeah.
All right. And that
So
building, right, is believed to be one of the few that survived the fire of 1666. Is that right?
yes, correct. Yeah, because even some of the, as we'll get to later down the line, some of those pubs weren't lucky enough to survive it and had to be rebuilt. So yeah, it was definitely one of the rarer ones that survived it.
The question came up when we were sitting there. Someone wanted to know how that fire started. Google says that fire started by a bakery that did not clean the embers out of their oven at night very well.
Okay.
And the city was so overgrown in all wood timber that it just went up uncontrollably. So that's the history of the Great London Fire.
Right.
The Bell was one of the few, maybe the only tavern we went to that is original building that survived that fire. It also kind of came away as most notorious for our Civco crew because they had Bass Ale
They had Bass
on
Ale.
the cask. So we do have questions about Bass Ale. That was seemed to be really prevalent 15, 20 years ago in the States.
Yeah.
And it said it had England's oldest trademark, the red triangle.
Yeah.
Saw it everywhere. You don't see it in the States anymore. I think we can answer the question. We saw it sparingly, but is Bass Ale hard to find, as hard as we seem to make it to find anyway?
I don't think it's as hard to find as it is in the States. Obviously, they've still got a market presence here. I think the problem is like I hinted at earlier, is the shift in the younger generations into they're drinking ciders and lagers. So maybe their market share is going down a little bit. So they're having to pick and choose their areas of where they're succeeding at. But yeah, you definitely see it. And it wasn't planned. I didn't know they were going to have it. I didn't,
Yeah.
look at the pubs. So it was just, I think, really fortunate that we.
I would have believed that you had scouted that out and you picked it specifically to scratch the itch that you knew I was in search of. I was super excited to see Bass on Tap because it's like we mentioned in the States, at least, I think since COVID, it's been non-existent. And so
Yeah.
it was a nice treat. We were not met with a friendly reception when someone in our party wanted to get a black and tan.
Oh, yeah.
And the bartenders thought that was absolute sacrilege. They'd never heard of such a thing, and they weren't about to do a half and half.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean they're too young to, I think, understand it, and they were so far up their own arse. I don't think they knew what else to do really. But yeah, it's typical look like silver spoon university students who were just forced to get a job to pay for their weekends. So yeah, I don't think they didn't want to do any more work than they had to.
It was a short stop, but I think many of us had the bass.
Yes.
And a bag of chips, and we were I guess I should say crisps. Some salty, crunchy things because we knew we were going to have to try and get some food in us, and that was a little bit of a challenge, but we got it done. But short stop, Bass on Tap, great place.
So really quick on the black and tan, is that something you were familiar with in growing up, going to pubs, or is that strictly like an American thing, or was it a thing that's gone? What's the take?
It's an older generation. I think it would be like my dad's generation, definitely more so that they would know about that than my generation.
Okay, but we didn't make it up over here. You're saying?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, because I spoke to Stu about it. He said, he said they're just too young.
All right. Well, I had someone once upon a time tell me in the States at a Irish pub that the genesis of black and tan is they'll pour them in Ireland because the English ale's on the bottom and the Irish is on top. I don't know if there's any.
I wouldn't be surprised. There's always some, healthy love, to say the least, in that department. So,
so from the Bell, then we went to one that I think everyone really enjoyed, and that was the Old Cheshire Cheese, which maybe is the most famous if you just Google historic pub of London.
Yeah, so Cheshire Cheese, one of 1538, it was founded on its location, didn't survive the Great Fire, so it was rebuilt in 1667. You go inside and it's definitely, it's like stepping back in time a little bit. They've got little hidden rooms. Everything's, each room's got its own different presence and I think feeling to it, which is quite nice. And it's had a fair share of famous visitors over its time: Winston Churchill, Mark Twain, Charles Dickens. So quite a spread of timeline there for those people visiting the establishment. But again, kind of a shit show when we arrived in there. They were running around like headless chickens. So
we were trying to get a food order in before the kitchen was closed. But you talked about like the heritage of it, and they had posted signage outside that said, how long they'd been going and under each king and queen, and they had to like add on to put Charles, like they had a little extension of the little namesake that has all the, famous, well, not famous, but kings and queens of England, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned the food, because we did do food there. You want to talk just a little bit about pub food culture and the difference between, I know standard pub fare, a little bit about that, but any of the more dodgy places that you would call a dive pub, what would you expect for food, if any, at a place like that in the UK?
So a dive pub, like a rough pub, looking at it, and I'm just stealing it off this old bloke I knew who were at one of my first jobs. his name, I can't remember his name, but he would call it Bing food because they just pop it out of a microwave. It's just like God knows what it is.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
you've got levels of pubs. You've got your rough pub, you've got your normal local, and then you've got gastro pub. And gastro pubs just happen to be really nice restaurants with good beer on tap. Where
yeah.
there used to be a pub at some point in time, and they converted it into a nice eatery, and you can still just get a lot of beer.
So what we had at the Cheshire Cheese, we had Scotch eggs,
Yep.
which I think you can find in a lot of places. Is that right, Nat? Is that a pretty?
Yeah, Scotch eggs. I mean, I think I think for you guys, people probably prefer them warm. We like that stuff cold, like
Yeah.
pork pies, Scotch eggs. I'll eat that cold as like food on the road if I'm driving for work and I need something quick to eat. I'll grab that. Sometimes depending on how I'm feeling, of course. But that Plowman's is big for us as well. Like obviously, Plowman's is again, it's just mix of cheeses, salad, some type of pickles, stuff like that,
Mhm.
pickled, jarred, pickled onion, that type of stuff, and you'll put it in a sandwich. Obviously the form we had was more kind of just spread apart, but I would say most time it's a ploughman's in a sandwich form. But in terms of hot food, which we didn't have there, but steak and ale pies, fish and chips. I
Mhm.
think fish and chips is definitely more of an idea of pub food if you're in the city and people are coming as tourists. If you're at a proper countryside pub, you're not going to have fish and chips at the pub. You're going to go to your chip shop after you've been drinking. And that's kind of like your late night dirty food. You get
Yeah.
in the chippy and stumble home, get a battered sausage and a large cod and chips with vinegar and salt. So
Perfect.
Right.
And so the pies, meat pie, steak pie, chicken and leek pie. What's your favorite?
I really like steak and ale pie,
Yeah.
but I chicken bacon and leek. That's another close second, I would say. Um, yeah, it's good food for if the weather's shit, it's cold outside, and it's raining. You're gonna go after work, get out of the weather, meet up with some friends. You're gonna drink prominently first, and then you're kind of gonna load up on some food after. We're not like the French who go to eat first, which is ridiculous. So we're gonna go
Right.
drink first, and then get food
Right.
after,
Then
and
try
then
to
we'll be
soak it up.
drinking.
That's right. Yeah. So you tapped on maybe one of the questions we were going to ask you was the difference between French, Parisian, and France drinking culture, pub culture, which I would I'm going to call it that, versus London and the UK. Probably.
Yeah, if I was French and like say, when I was closer to my friends before I moved to this area, every Friday we'd meet at the pub like clockwork as soon as we all finished work, and we'd probably stay there till 9, 10 at night and go home because I think what people think is, oh, a pub will be open late. In reality, most pubs, especially in the countryside, they're probably closing at 10, 11 at the latest.
Hmm.
So you go in and you get your drinks early, and you have plenty of them, and then you go home and you pass out after eating some food on the way home, walking, stumbling, bouncing. You find your way back. Where I think the French after work, what they do is they go find a place where they can sit outside and they make sure it's got a really good view to judge the passerbys, and then they order some small plate food and then sip their wine, thinking about why they smell their own farts. So
Perfect. I think that's summed it up
Very,
very succinctly.
some opinions of the French never change.
That's right. Exactly. All right. The
no,
last thing on the food front before we get off the topic, do you want to explain and then try to justify the British breakfast?
yes. I think it's one of those things. If you come over here, you need to try a proper fry up breakfast. You're going to need your black pudding.
Mm,
Yes, yes, it's congealed blood cooked in a sausage. It's fantastic. Don't knock it until you try it.
right.
All right.
Our sausages, the back bacon. We've incorporated hash browns now into it, so there are hash browns in our breakfast. You've got the fried tomato,
Mm.
you've got the mushrooms, and you've got what we call fried eggs, sunny side up for you guys, and make sure the yolk's always runny. And then we add beans in because when you've got that much meat and fattiness, you need some type of, our beans are tomato based sauce. So it helps break through the saltiness and the fattiness of the meat to kind of give it, a balance to the acidic part of the breakfast, if that makes sense. And also, you're eating that much meat, you're going to need some fiber.
Right.
All right.
That's probably the best excuse I've had. I mean, I went to Stratford upon Avon, stayed in a little bed and breakfast type of
Yeah.
thing, and the kind of the highlight of that breakfast was the beans. I had more beans than I had anything. I had like two or three good sized chunks of sausage, but their beans were what they were proud of. Yeah, that's what I was having that morning.
Yeah. I for one am a fan. I love it. I love it.
I've not been a big fan of the beans on the plate, but I'll tell you what, you definitely described it and justified it in such a way I might have to revisit it.
Did you leave out and maybe this is more of I'm used to what they call the Ulster fry, which is more like a Northern Ireland thing, but like there's often as well brown bread that's been fried.
Yeah,
Is
so yeah,
that
fried
also
bread.
on an English breakfast plate at times?
So I think when you go up north more, if you go up to like Yorkshire and places
Yeah.
like that, you'll get fried bread. Down by me, it's more so an optional side of toast. I'd
Okay.
say if you want toast on the side, you go up north, they'll do like fried white bread. And then
Okay.
Scotland's breakfast is actually really good. You get square sausage, you can get potato like pancakes
Yes, love
with
those.
it, and then they do haggis as well, which is
Oh,
also I'm a big fan of haggis, but I don't know how many people actually like eating, hearts and lungs and stuff. It's an acquired taste.
Certainly an acquired taste, that's for sure. But I don't mind it. If you've had haggis, you're Scottish.
Yeah, I enjoy haggis. I enjoy Scotch eggs too. That's so not deviating too far from what we're talking about in with the Parisians. Is there a difference between the Scottish pub, the Irish pub, and the British pub?
Yeah, I think there's the distinct differences. So I'll start with the Irish because they're across the water. They're definitely it's more of at least it depends. You've got to pick and choose like anywhere. You're going to have more touristy places. You're going to have more local places. And I was across in Belfast for a conference one time, and me being me, I just went out by myself one evening, and I'm chatting to two Irish guys. One was a unionist, and one was a Republican, which was definitely interesting. But
Nice.
they grew up together, and they're like, "Oh, it's just an old people problem." But I stayed out with them. All the pubs closed. And they pulled me in the back door of one of them, and they had, the Irish music playing, live instruments, stuff like that. And I think in that regard, I would say it's more of a warm atmosphere with the Irish pubs. You can get it's a little more lively. There's music, it's going to be a little bit more going on. Uh,
yeah.
Scottish pubs, I think, yeah, it's they're rugged and cozy if that makes any type of sense. They're definitely Scotland's a rainy place, similar to Ireland, probably if not even a little worse with the weather. They look rugged on the outside. You go on the inside, they're nice, places to be out of the weather. Um, and good spirits. Obviously, the Irish are known for their spirits as well. But when you're in Scotland, you're going to get some good Scotch selection, stuff like that. That most pubs you're going to go to anywhere else aren't going to have the variety that you're going to pick from off the shelf. Um, and then I'd say England is like, it's definitely the outside of London is more of the public house atmosphere. You're going to meet your friends. No one's going to be playing like loud music. You're all going to be sat around on your individual tables, and everyone's going to be catching up and, just having the discussions of what they did for the week and what they're, just being with friends. While in London and I guess population centers, the pub culture is depends where you are. People go straight from work on a weekday. You're going to see them there in their suits, briefcases. They're going to drink until they stumble home and just pass out and wake up for work. Then on a Friday through Saturday, they're going to use it as their, I guess, what we call pre-drinks, pre-game for you guys. And they're going to go there, and then they're going to go to a nightclub that's open till like 7 in the morning afterwards.
Right.
So, but I would say they all have intermingling similarities, but obviously, I know Irish people won't, and Scottish people don't like. I wouldn't like an Englishman saying this, but we're not so different. But we like to say we are. It's like a load of brothers like wanting to beat each other up all the time. But you look at in terms of the pub cultures, there is similarities, but also uniqueness at the same time. If that makes sense.
Right. If you get out in the countryside, like not in London proper, not in the cities, are all three cultures, they all have families there, kids in the pubs, eating dinners, and is that
Yeah,
similar in that way?
yeah, I'd say so. And the pub is where you're going to meet up with the in-laws and stuff like that, and the kids are going to come along, and then the dads, and a lot of time in British women or Scottish or Irish women, they're all going to drink their fair share too. But a lot of the time, it's the dads are having a lot of drink with the father-in-law or with their dad.
Well, I was
But
going
it's
to ask you, Nathaniel, because
yeah,
I was told, and I don't know if this is a particular thing to Irish culture or Irish pubs, but can you talk a little bit about the snug? Like, is there a snug? My experience of the snug in Belfast when I was there was there's a place called the Crown right across from the Europa Hotel, and they
mm,
have these little booths that are set up,
Hmm.
and it's got like a little window, so you go inside this the pub booth, if you will, has a door on it,
Yep.
and you can slide a pint, through it, and I
All of the
understood,
Peaky Blinders fans listening are like, yeah, I know
yeah,
that.
and I thought that was. I don't know if this is true, and maybe you can verify if it is or not, but I thought that was like maybe women weren't supposed to be seen drinking in public, so like a snug was a place where they could do that, or maybe there was something to do with the clergy as well. Is there any truth to that, or do I have my
I
snug
mean,
legend straight?
to be honest, I think that would probably be more nail on the head for that because if you look at it as well in that regard, they're not going to stuff the like working class common guys in there who just got back from a shift in the factory in there.
Yeah.
They're going to reserve it for people that aren't going to want to be bothered or seen,
Hmm.
and they kind of want their own space to be a little bit private in the pub, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Yeah, I did. I read a book on the history of Irish pubs that
Yeah.
did confirm that the original reason for the snug was for women
Women.
and or clergy.
Yeah.
But to your point, we've been at some pubs in Dublin, and there were some famous people there, and that's what the snug was clearly for.
Yeah.
So they could be
Yeah.
out of sight, out of mind, and not harassed
Not
for
bothered.
selfies and autographs.
Yeah. Yeah.
But one thing I wanted to ask you about the London pubs, and I have not seen this in other places in Europe, is this practice of standing outside drinking your pints, not in a dedicated beer garden or space associated by any account with the pub. People getting their pints, going outside, and just the block of the pub standing on the sidewalks like that.
Yeah, it's that's the after, especially on a weekday, it's just full of suits. They're all standing outside. There's literally no room inside. It's just packed to the gills and everyone, yeah, you drink outside on the street. You don't have to worry about open container or anything like that. And you're not going to get bothered by the police unless you're being stupid chucking pint glasses at people, but you
Yeah, and
know,
they give you a real pint glass, right? It's not like they give you a paper cup or a plastic cup. You get a proper cup.
yeah, you get a proper glass until about like 20 minutes before close and they give you a to-go cup.
Okay.
All right, back to the tour. The last place we did on the official tour was the bank,
Yes.
if I got that right.
Yes, so the Bank of England, so 1888 to 1975, it was, I guess, best way to put it is the Treasury building for us, which is the Bank of England. And then someone, that moved on and they had to relocate it probably to make it larger and go somewhere else. So, someone had the bright idea of turning in. And I think, obviously it's not old in terms of age of being a drinking establishment, but the building itself on the inside definitely has some uniqueness and character to it. And, as we saw in the back garden as well, they got a double-decker London bus out back
Mhm.
too. So they've definitely, made their own mark in their own way and utilized the architecture of the building to their advantage.
Yeah, that's a very ornate, really beautiful space
It
on
was
the
nice.
inside.
Yeah, super nice.
Yeah.
What I found out after the fact, I think the next day I took a train down to visit some friends. Um, and I met them in Richmond, and they're big rugby fans. And I had noticed that, like, because like most of the pubs don't have televisions.
Yeah.
Sports, that's more of a sports bar or a sports pub.
Yeah.
And in the bank, they did have a TV going, and there were some just very intent, TV watchers. And I realized that wasn't there a rugby? I think it's Six Nations rugby. I used to think it was
Yeah.
Seven Nations, but Six Nations rugby was going on. And England was playing France, and I think it went into like maybe even extra minutes or something like that, and England won. And we were just carrying on and drinking our gin and chatting about, but I think that was a pretty big game that was taking place, and there were definitely some people in there to watch that.
Yeah, no, it's West London specifically where Richmond is because that's right next to Twickenham. So that's where the national stadium is for the rugby team, for England rugby team. So it's like an
Okay.
80,000 seat stadium, something like that for rugby. And yeah, West London, I would say it's probably the area where people are a little bit more well off and they're not so into the football hooliganism, and they're more into the more rugby. You'll beat the shit out of each other for
Rugby's
80.
more civilized than football, is what you're saying?
Well, in terms of not when you're beating the shit out of each other for 80 minutes, but then afterwards you shake hands and have drinks together where the
Okay.
football hooligans will just stab each other or something or chuck bricks. So, but yeah, Six Nations is a big deal. It's every year. Italy, France, England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland play in like a tournament against each other, and it's whoever's got the most wins at the end gets through. England were favourites going in, and then we absolutely just lost the plot. So yeah, we won't
Hey
speak about
guys,
that.
what are you afraid of New Zealand and Australia or what?
Well, actually, that's why we were favourites going in because we beat New Zealand, and that going in, we're looking in good shape. And then yeah,
Oh, so in the end, did England lose to France then?
in
Oh,
they converted a kick in the last minute of the
okay.
match, and then they won the Six Nations off of that.
Okay.
So the Irish weren't happy with us, the Scottish weren't happy with us because they were needing us to win, but I don't think we were wanting to do them any favors either. But
All right, so those were the four we did on the official
I guess so, yeah.
pub tour. I didn't prep you for this, but I assume you'll be able to speak to it, Nat. I want to ask you about a couple places that we visited or have visited that weren't part of this specific tour. First one
Yeah.
is Churchill Arms, a pub that looks like it oozes a lot of history. Doesn't really ooze history, or is this a tourist created destination?
I would say it's very photogenic, and obviously, I, was it you, Brad, that brought up the flowers?
Oh, it was Josh that was asking about that.
Josh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Josh was very curious because obviously Churchill Arms looks like someone's put
Yeah.
a garden center on the outside of it, and it's kind of like what is it? Temple Bar in Dublin where they do it up on the outside all the time. I guess
Yeah.
that's the equivalent is Churchill Arms for Christmas. It's got lights all over the outside, so for specific things they do it up, and you know. I think in terms of its age, yeah, it's been around, but I think now in that part of London, it's definitely one of those places that's fallen under the scrolling on Instagram reels and getting
Mhm.
somewhere to go look at. Where with the pub tour we did, I tried to kind of stay away from that.
Yep.
Blackfriars was obviously very busy. It is conveniently right next to a train station,
Yeah.
but it wasn't like most of Cheshire Cheese is a bit different. It wasn't like we went in these places and it was ram full of people like recording influencer TikToks and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
But Churchill definitely, I would say, is falling under that these
Yeah,
days.
I think if you're planning a trip to London and you Google pubs, pictures of Churchill's probably going to be the first thing you see.
Yeah.
All flags inside, and like you said, heavily decorated with lights and stuff on the outside. So, but still a nice pub with
Yeah, it's great.
proper pints for sure. The other one I wanted to ask you about is Mr. Fogg's Hat Tavern, specifically the Gin Club Speakeasy. That place is phenomenal. Are there other speakeasy gin clubs throughout the city like that? Is that truly a London thing, or is that kind of a unique spot?
Yeah, I think in terms of there are Mr. Fogs dotted about. It's a London centric thing, Mr. Fogs.
Yeah.
So obviously, I think with time they've grown in popularity, but I think that location there definitely is a unique one where you can go downstairs and you got to walk past through the painting door, and everyone keeps opening it thinking they're going to the toilet, but they walk into that nice little space where you're down doing gin flights and all type of cocktails. So I'd say that one's more unique in terms of that regard and the way it's decorated, and it's kind of like going in a time capsule. Where I think gin in general, most pubs are going to serve some really good quality gin. If you go to a nicer pub and not a rough pub, they're going to have a good selection of gins to go through. And I think it's, this day and age with people being a little bit more health conscious, a lot of people are turning to gin and tonics for their evening drinks because it's a little less heavy on the calorie front if you're drinking all night too.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned health trends. I was going to save this for last, but since you mentioned it, we've heard there's this trend of some people planning dinners at restaurants that have no alcohol at all in London.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with this practice? And who
What's
would
up?
do such a thing?
What's up with that?
I heard the dickheads, to be honest. No, yeah, that was rather unfortunate. I thought Stu was going to have a heart attack.
This is
Yeah,
a bit of an inside joke for our listeners. Nathaniel made reservations at an absolutely fantastic
Great.
Indian restaurant for us in London, which is
You got to do.
London is
Yeah.
famous for its wonderful Indian food, and this was no exception. However, we were all somewhat surprised as we were scouring through the cocktail menu to see that it was all non-alcohol. So we had to save our intake for after the meal. We were a bit like Parisians that night.
Yeah, we were definitely judging and looking around that night.
That's
But
right.
yeah, and their I guess thinking on the menu was for health reasons. But I think as well in the UK, a lot of Indian restaurants will be labeled as Indian cuisine, but they're actually cooked by like Bangladeshi cooks and staff.
Mhm.
They're not Hindi or Sikh background; they're Muslim background. So it may be on the grounds of, it was Ramadan and
And it
things
was
like
Ramadan, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I
So-
think that's their policy year round.
Yeah, it looked like it was.
Yeah,
Good
but
trend there.
they might just say it's for health reasons, but maybe they got sick of serving drunk English people trying to eat curry and
Yes.
drink a load of beer because their curry's too hot, like my Danish colleague who was pouring sweat. So
Oh, that was great.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
get the spice in
Yeah.
any of these places, that's for sure. All right, the last two establishments I wanted to just touch on quickly. They're side by side in Kensington. To me, they both seem like dive bars. One clearly bills itself more so than the other. I think you know what I'm talking about. You want to tell us a little bit about those two establishments and any context around them.
yeah, so we were pleasantly surprised, like when we were going by. After Churchill, we went to this place. It's a dedicated dive bar that's Philly themed, and it was definitely. I think it's a really good idea as well because there's a lot of expat Americans, especially in West London, that area, Kensington. There's a lot of people in Holland Park, those areas that Hammersmith that I've noticed are from a US background that have been living in the UK for quite some time. As we saw in there too,
Yeah.
they had quite a healthy, patronage of what it seemed like regulars that were in there and that have been over here for a while. So I think they're trying to get a little bit of taste of home. And then right next door is the Prince of Wales, which, yeah, it's one of the pubs that's open later, like midnight to 1 o'clock, depending if when they want to close and if the staff are fed up or if people were sick of drinks being spilled on the floor. Because yeah, that was definitely in terms of that's a rough pub. If it's not rough pub in terms of the people drinking in it, but the way it's maintained by the staff, like that
Yeah.
toilet. Like,
Yeah.
oh my God, it was you might as well get a pair of wellies on and walk in there because it was like flooded. It was ridiculous.
So the first one you talked about, if you walked up the street, you might think the name of this bar was American Dive Bar because that is what is above the door. What would be the sign? It's actually called Passyunk Avenue, obviously a tribute to Philadelphia. And as Nat said, when you go in, it is all vintage Philadelphia sports decor. I think the menu is two things: cheesesteaks and chicken wings.
Yeah.
And they had a completely imitation ripoff Yingling called Yunkling with the exact same tap handle, which was fantastic. So, and PBR, which you will confirm is maybe the first time you said you've seen PBR on tap.
Yeah, that was the first. I mean, we made sure we took advantage of that opportunity and had our fair few before calling it. But yeah, it was definitely I was like, wow, I got to drink at least 3 of these because when am I going to get PBR on tap again? So
That's right.
So we tried to do that, John. I don't like to correct you on a pub crawl lineup, but I think you missed one. You
we
were
skip
sa-
over one?
you-
Oh,
James-
City of York.
You were saying the bank was the end of the line, but we went to City of York.
Oh, we did have one more.
We went to a pretty solid place called City of York that was part of, I think, the original tour.
Yeah,
Then
Ray's going to edit this so it does not appear
we can
that I
fix it.
forgot
We can fix that.
That's
We can
fine.
fix
I can
that. We'll
hold
take that out in post, as they say.
I got so excited about the American Dive Bar and talking about it, I skipped the final one. So, and I know you've done like an hour of research, so go ahead, Nat, tell us about it.
No, so yeah, City of York. I think for me, in terms of aesthetically looking at it, that was my personal favorite. In terms
Yeah.
of, you walk inside, it almost looks like you're walking into a church of beer. That I think that's how I describe it.
Great bar.
Yeah, that was the kind of A beams or whatever, and then
Yeah.
had a
So
little confessional booze.
They had like the snug vibe, kind of, but it didn't have like a closing door, but it had that little cozy booth vibe. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it looked like, you had to go to the priest if you're Catholic and confess your sins of the week, and then he'll say 10 Hail Marys and five
Yeah.
Our Fathers and have a pint afterwards. So it was definitely nice. It's been on that location since 1430, sorry. So it's definitely one of the older ones, and it's even older than Ye Old Cheshire Cheese.
Wow.
So it's I think it's one of those hidden places. As you saw inside, it was more of the local crowd, other than the screaming Welsh blokes, but who were using traffic cones as megaphones when they left. But
Oh, the Welsh.
Yeah.
What are you going to do with them?
And we experienced the ringing of the bell, which is like, get your ass out of here, because that must have been like 11 o'clock time to,
yeah,
liquor license closes at 11. So get on your way.
and that's really
for at
common,
least 3 or
actually.
4 ringings, I think it was.
Yeah, so they'll do the one ringing is kind of like, get your attention, let's get a move on. Second ring's like, come on, we really mean it now. Make sure you get your last orders in. And the third one's like, yeah, I'm done with you. You're not getting any more. So
Awesome.
Yeah. And then was the taxi ride to the American
Yeah.
pub that happened to be closed.
Well, I was going to say,
and
they're not real American Dive Bar hospitable there because they did not let us in. He was done at whatever time that was. Kind of early.
yeah, there's no negotiating, I don't
Yeah.
think.
No.
So why are pubs in some parts of the city open later then?
so if you're in Kensington area, there's probably our local councils who run the licenses and stuff.
Okay.
They'll definitely be more so under the influence of people who will constantly complain or write in with emails, saying, "Oh, these people kept me awake at this time. I want you to shut down." So it's because it's mixed in more with a lot of the residential areas of London. So that's why, for the most, even in London or outside of London, your pubs will close at 11. So then, you're not kicking out at like 2 a.m. and everyone's screaming. And if you go more central, if you're going to go into like Soho, Leicester Square, Piccadilly Circus, those areas, they'll be open till 1 o'clock. And then there'll be a conveniently located like nightclub and stuff next to them as well.
But there's that between hour. So like when we tried to go to the American Dive Bar and they denied us entry, we went 2 doors down. What was the name of that place?
Prince of Wales.
We went to the Prince of Wales, and they had a raucous crowd and they were still going when we left, right? So somehow they decided we're going to pay for and they weren't a night, because like in my experience as a student, it was the pubs closed at 11, and if you wanted to drink after that, you had to pay a cover to go to like a nightclub, like a dance place, basically. Yeah. And this was just a bar. This was a bar. It wasn't I wouldn't call it a nightclub by any stretch. No. But they were like still rocking and rolling. So somehow they must pay an extra, I don't know, there must be some different liquor license you can get. I don't know how that works, but
yeah, I think so. And and it's up to, a lot of pubs in London at least will be under like Green King or Fuller's, which are like chain pubs.
Okay.
But they'll have different managers, and I think they have a little bit of play themselves of how they want to run it. And like by your hotel, the Devonshire Arms there, right above them is a flat, so they kind of close right on time, especially on a Sunday. Sure. And I think obviously our days were bleeding together a bit because we were working over the weekend. We went out on Sunday expecting everything to be open, and that's one thing that's here. Sundays are still, it's becoming a little bit more Americanized, where a lot more stuff is open, and compared to when I was a kid. But Sundays are still really reduced working hours. You're talking like 11 to 4 o'clock at most places, whether it's pubs or even stores of some kind where they try and give people at least one day off.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
the other
yeah,
loophole that I found when I was a student was because we couldn't afford cover, right? So the bars would or the pubs would close at 11
yeah,
and we had nowhere to turn. And I'm thinking, man, we're in one of the biggest metropolitan area, like biggest cities in the
Yeah.
world. And like I can't get a drink at 11:30. What's going on? But we found out that across the street from where we were staying was a hotel and they actually served as long as there was like a patron in the bar, they could stay open past 11. So that was our little way of keeping going if we didn't want to go pay £7 to get into a spot. But it was interesting because I think maybe that's a newer thing that what Prince of Wales is doing, like staying open post 11. It's a good thing. I'm pro. I support.
yeah. I think as well. You're going to get areas, and they're gonna know all the other pubs in the area are going to close down, so they can kind of get an
Yeah.
idea of the market. They're like, well, there's a hole that needs to be filled here,
Yeah.
so I can make a little extra money being open an extra 2 hours compared to everyone else. Which definitely that place was busy, so they're
It
definitely making
was.
money.
Yeah, there were some. Yeah, it was crowded, and there was some spillage, as you mentioned. There was some broken glass going down.
Yes, so for sure. It was a proper mess, that's for sure. Um, London's famous for celebrity sightings. Nat, what's King Charles's favorite pub? Where are you likely to see him at closing time of the business day?
Oh, God knows with him.
He's out in the countryside, isn't he? Whenever we
Yeah,
see like the news carries that he stumbles into this little countryside pub and where the ceilings are only like 5'8" tall and you gotta duck over and
I thought
yeah.
he used
It's
to hang out in Scotland.
Yeah,
yeah, he
the Queen did, right? She was in
yeah,
Balmoral all the time, but I don't
yeah.
know if this is true. I had read as a tourist that with the Union Jacks flying over Buckingham Palace, that the monarch is there, and I think damn near every time I've been by Buckingham Palace, the Union Jacks are flying. So is that not
So
true? Is he always there?
so it's opposite. If the Union Jack's up, no one's in. If the coat of arms is up, which
Ah,
is
there you go.
the
Okay.
royal,
Oh,
so that's the flag. Where if I guess the best way to look at it is it's four different squares of colors, and they're like yellows and blue and red, and or gold, blue, and red, and that's the royal family standard.
Okay.
So, but Charles spends a lot of time at Windsor, which isn't far from where I am. Um, he obviously goes into Buckingham Palace a fair bit, but yeah, the late Queen was definitely much more of a fan of being up in Scotland and definitely enjoyed her time up in Scotland.
What was it that Josh was saying? We were talking football clubs. So,
Yes,
what is the one that Charles supports?
I,
You know?
no, I've got no clue.
Okay.
I know William supports Aston Villa, which is quite strange, which is a Birmingham club.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Okay. And what's your club, Nathaniel?
Arsenal. We just lost in a cup final match today.
Oh, sorry. Sorry to hear
It's
that.
fine. We're in the
Now,
running. We're in the running for four of them, unlike Josh's team, who are going to get relegated. So
so he's Tottenham,
yeah,
and that's the team that you said could get relegated. They could lose their status in the league.
yeah, and they're also my team's biggest rival. Like absolutely
Okay.
despise each other. Yeah, but
There you
you
go.
know,
So it's going to happen. Are they actually going to go down?
well, they lost again today. They're literally tied on points with the teams in the bottom three of the league. So they've got
Okay.
another month and a bit to go. But yeah, it's not looking good for them. And
Okay.
they're a big team. They just built a £1 billion stadium that's used for NFL games as well in London.
Oh,
So
wow.
they've put a lot of investment in it. They're going to lose, a load of revenue if they go down. So it's going to be bad for them.
all right. One more question for you on the pub front. You're a Guinness fan.
Yes,
What's the best pour Guinness in London?
Ooh.
we haven't been there, and we need to get you there. It's Devonshire Arms. It's owned by an Irish bloke,
Okay.
and that's known and has been rated. And Guinness, I need to dig this out and send it to you, but Guinness did release at one point in time what they rated as the best pours in London as the establishments for that. So I've got it on
Okay.
my phone somewhere. I need to dig that out next time you're over. But
So I, I don't understand exactly how your pub names work because it feels like there's a Devonshire as often as there are Starbucks in the United
I think
States.
I've been to the
Are these
Devonshire
all
Lounge.
independently? And is this one you're talking about, the one fairly close to Piccadilly?
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
one more central. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that seems.
Okay.
All right, boys. That
You're,
leads us into our speed
you're
round.
distributing the pads, so you
Right,
must have a game to play.
Nat, do you have a pen and paper there?
Yes, I do.
All right, it's time for the speed
I
round.
need it. All
I
right.
should have asked, do you guys have it all out of your system, or do you have more questions?
Yeah, I think we figured it out. My biggest quandary around London and pub culture was why can't I get a drink at 11:05?
Right.
Or with my tiki masala.
My my main question wasn't necessarily drink related, but have you ever been to Worcester before?
Yes, I have.
Tell me, is their sauce really all that? Because in the United States, the Worcestershire sauce is all anybody talks about.
I mean, it's really, if you have like steak pies and stuff, a lot of the like bases and the slow cooking of meats, it's really good for that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And like another one is a Lee Perrin sauce, if that rings any bells.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it does. That's the high holy.
So, those two are quite frequent, especially in slow cooking of beef and stuff like that and lamb. Yeah, I think it's worth getting into if you haven't tried it before.
That's great and the Bloody Mary too.
Before we put the wrap on and go speed round, Nathaniel, we talked about you spending some time in Chicago. I think it's worth noting Nathaniel's grandfather played for the Chicago Bears.
Heck yeah.
And I believe it was the first NFL player of Hispanic descent. Is that?
Yeah, first or second, something along those lines. It was in the mid-40s. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Which is
fascinating to
pretty
learn. Yeah.
Yeah.
Saw that photo. That was amazing. Yeah, that's so cool.
So Nathaniel, his mom is obviously makes amazing, authentic Mexican food, makes amazing, authentic Chicago deep dish pizzas, and then all the staple British fare. So
Maybe that's the question. Where do you go in London for good Mexican food?
I just go around my parents' house. I have her make enchiladas or tamales. I don't. Yeah, most of the time here it's some bastardized version because people have no clue what it is. The only thing I'd go for is the tequila.
There you go.
Is there respectable pizza in London? At
Yeah,
least is Chicago style.
not Chicago style. In terms of pizza, obviously we do get a lot of Italians that move here. There's this place in Chiswick we had pizza the other day at, and it's actually voted top 10 pizza in the world, but it's that like Napoli style pizza, real thin base, fluffy, light crust, real Italy style pizza, not like Chicago pub style pizzas and stuff like that. So
I know, right? And you've not found a good pork tang bomb in the UK, right?
no, I think that there's a gap in the market.
Yeah, there's an opportunity there.
There's
an opportunity there.
People love Jaeger bombs here, so why not reinvent it?
All right, I like it. All right, Ray, you got a speed round for us?
All right, time for the speed round. Everybody get out your pad and paper. We are going to the 3 Isles of the British Isles, Scotland, Ireland, and of course England. I have made up 3 pub names, 2 real. So I will give them to you once. I'll go through the list, and you'll write down whether or not you believe this pub name is real or fake. And then we'll go back through a second time and you'll tell me. So the first one, the Frog and Rhubarb. The Frog and Rhubarb. Is that a real name or not? Okay. Second pub name, the Baron's Thunder Mug. The Baron's Thunder Mug. The third pub name, the Trolleyed Crown. The Trolleyed Crown. The fourth, the Hairy Lemon. And the last pub name, the Mutton Banger. Is the Mutton Banger real or not? So we'll go through. Nat, since you're our guest, the first one, the Frog and Rhubarb. Was it real or was it made up?
That sounds real to me.
I went made up.
Brad?
Real.
The Frog and Rhubarb is real. So the rhubarb means you're putting me on or you're joshing me. You're talking nonsense. So the frog is talking nonsense. Is that right? Rhubarb, is that kind of a slang name for it in England?
Yeah, I think it's more so like Cockney rhyming slang.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, and that, that's why I definitely looked at the name. I said that's definitely a pub name somewhere.
Right.
Frog and rhubarb. Where is it?
I don't know that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Skokie, Illinois.
Skokie. Kankakee.
Gary, Indiana, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
The Baron's Thunder Mug. The Baron's Thunder Mug.
You know what? It seems so bizarre. I said it's real.
I went fake on this one.
Yeah. Nat?
I went fake.
Fake. So do you guys know what a Thunder Mug is?
I don't.
Nat, you know what a Thunder Mug is?
No, this is out of my expertise.
It's what you look like when you have 5 bottom shelf tequilas.
Right. A Thunder Mug is a chamber pot. It's what you keep underneath your bed.
Oh,
Yeah.
Churchill Arms, where we spent time with Nat.
Yeah.
The room where we're standing in, from the rafters, had maybe 100 of them hanging above us. We had a whole discussion around this. The Thunder Mug
We
is
didn't know the name.
the bedpan.
Bedpan, yeah. And it is made up. I made that up.
God,
the Baron's bedpan is made up. All right. So next, Brad, the trolleyed crown. Is that made up or is it real?
I went with made up
All right.
on that one.
Nat, what did you think?
I went with real.
I'm telling you what, it seemed so real. I went with
That's what I thought. I thought it was
Right. So trolleyed is a nickname for piss drunk.
Okay.
So if you get so drunk that you have to be pushed around, it's a trolleyed. So the trolleyed crown is fake. I made that up.
All right.
Okay.
But it should be. Nat, you're welcome to have that if you want to open up a bar. I don't know if you're going to get in trouble, but
He hasn't copyrighted. You didn't.
no, I did not
okay.
trademark or copyright that.
Right.
So
We could do that and then serve tang bombs.
right, exactly. All right, the next one is the Harry Lemon. Is the Harry Lemon real or not?
Go ahead.
Nat, we'll start with you.
I'm gonna go with yes, because I've seen some outrageous pub names in my time, so I would not be surprised.
I had it real.
The Harry Lemon is most definitely real. Not only have I drank at the Harry Lemon, but I've sat and watched Becky join the band and play the accordion on stage.
Hey,
All right, the Harry Lemon's real.
In central Dublin.
it's very real.
All right, last but not least, the Mutton Banger. Brad, is the Mutton Banger real?
I'm a yes on that.
John?
Yeah, I think if you bring single pounds in, you can spend them at the Mutton Banger all night long.
Right.
Pound coin.
I went no with that
There's
one.
no such thing as a pound note, is there, or is there?
Pound coin.
Pound coin.
Yeah.
So, Nat, what do you think? The Mutton Banger, is that real or not?
I went no, but yeah, let's see.
Yeah, the Mutton Banger is not real.
Oh, what a shame.
Right.
Would have been a great name.
You would not want to go to Mutton Banger Island. That's for sure. So I made that one up. All right. Well,
Perfect.
Nat, hey, thanks for being with us today. You guys have not let us down. He was 100% everything you said he was going to be.
Thanks for joining Nat. Nat's been a fan. He's been listening to this pod. I think he's probably heard most of them, so he had the context. And thank you for taking the time to take us around and show us, around London town a little bit. It was awesome.
Yep. Yeah, I'll echo that. Thanks, Nathaniel. Thanks for the hospitality last week. It was fantastic as always, and look forward to exploring some new spots with you in the not too distant future.
I said no, absolutely. It's been a pleasure to be on, and it's been fun as always. And yeah, don't worry, I've got something lined up for Glasgow for you. You can learn the rough side of Scotland. Get a good taste of that.
Fantastic.
I like it.
Looking forward to it.
All right, everybody. Hey, thanks for subscribing and listening. Thanks for turning your friends on to us. It's always good to hear from you. We appreciate it, and we will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.